Hi, everyone. Welcome to episode 5 of the Beaker and Wrench minicast. My name is Lilibel. I am the co-founder and president of Beaker and Wrench, and I will be your host for today's episode. I'm so excited to have Murphy Murri, formerly Sano Gardens, as our guest today. She is very well known in the industry for being a leader in extraction, innovation, and knowledge, and I am honored that she's taken the time to join us today. Thank you, Murphy. How are you?
I'm well. Thank you for having me. It's been a while since we've been able to catch up, but
Yes.
yeah, it's always good to see you and see what's going on your end of the world.
Yeah, like when was the last time I saw you? Was that in Denver?
It would have been when we installed the wiper, I think.
Wiper. I had a really good time with you on that trip.
Yeah. I mean, that was a good time for you and I because the boys were the ones who had to deal with taking our doors off the hinges and trying to make it fit.
We totally adapted and overcame in that situation.
Yeah, we got it in for
That
sure.
was great.
You know,
That was a tight crew.
yeah.
So in today's episode, we're going to talk about your experience in the cannabis industry, the establishment of Sano Gardens, what it's been like being a woman leader and a mother in the cannabis industry, and your current work in mushroom extraction education and process development, which I'm super excited to hear about. So just some personal information. Can you tell me where you grew up? What's your background in cannabis and what inspired you to work with this plant?
Sure. Yeah. I grew up in Salt Lake in Utah. I was raised Mormon, and it's a very weird segue into, my cannabis background because they're not compatible. I grew up, with a family that was very conservative, but I also grew up with a family that doesn't drink, doesn't smoke, doesn't do drugs. So it was very easy for them to tell me not to drink, not to smoke, not to do drugs, and that abstinence only policy. Unfortunately, that didn't work out. And so, I've been using cannabis, for decades now because I'm old. Yeah, exactly. But I got involved in the cannabis industry almost sort of, passively. I was a cannabis user. And I was fortunate enough when I moved to Colorado from Utah to end up in the mountains, up in Summit County in the Vail area. And so what's cool about living up in the mountains is there's some good growers up there. And so at the time when I moved out here in 2006, we'd had medical since 2001 in Colorado, but it was the kind of medical where you needed a caregiver. Someone had to grow your weed for you somewhere, or you had to grow it yourself. So I wasn't as aware of what the legal change and difference was. I was just conveniently located close to some people who were really good at their job, and they were the right people to meet first.
Do you believe in fate? Do you think you were meant to be?
I don't know if it's so much fate as it is, it's kind of like freeway off-ramps where it's like you can take it or not. And I think everybody kind of misses exits when they could have taken them. And I've just fortunately, through timing and circumstance and just openness, been able to take the right exits and, certainly plenty of wrong ones, but meeting the right people up front was a big level up, big shortcut.
It just seems like, you're where you're meant to be. So I was just wondering if maybe you thought maybe this is meant to be or not, but I mean, it's fine either way. I've often felt like my life is a combination of timing and luck and my hard work, but also maybe some fate is in there too. Cause I feel like I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing, but
yeah, if not fate, spite for, my parents calling the cops on me when I was in high school. Now I can say, look,
Yeah.
I said I was going to smoke weed till I'm dead, and here I am, still smoking weed, not dead. So, it all worked out.
But I think that for you, you also have a very scientific mind and, you take the science really seriously. So were you a nerd as a child or, what's your background with that?
I'm one of those people that thought I was artistic when I was younger. And it turns out that I'm not artistic, maybe creative, but not necessarily the arts, right? I was a debate captain. I was always, the public speaking was huge, and I think that is obvious if you've been to classes and talked to me. But I really, Yeah, but I really didn't get into the science early on. And it's not because I wasn't interested in it. I think I just didn't recognize it. And this is probably common for a lot of people, especially women, is that
Mhm.
we are taught that, science is something that happens in a separate room with a calculator and a lot of training.
Yeah.
But I grew up Mormon, right? So that was a lot of do it yourselfing. My parents are, canning all of the food they grow every year. My dad is, making his own vinegar. There's a lot of fermentation and there's a lot of chemistry in
My
in baking, in food,
goodness.
yeah, exactly. So that kind of figure it out yourself mentality definitely does come from the way that I was raised. I just didn't recognize it as the scientific method. The scientific method my dad uses is growing multiple different spicy peppers and figuring out which one is so hot that everyone cries. And I took that I took that methodology and brought it over to the things I like, which are not exactly spicy peppers, but
Yeah. No,
still
it's amazing.
require some sorting.
I
So
love
it's
right.
something I wouldn't have planned,
Yeah,
I wouldn't have thought that I ended up here. But at the same time, I think a lot of people who knew me when I was younger are not surprised at all.
totally. I mean, I didn't even go to college until I was like 26, and I did not see myself as being a chemist ever. I was not,
Right.
I didn't have an education. I was in the military, but when I was little, I would crush up plants and make concoctions. Like I thought I
Yeah.
was like an alchemist, and I was like making potions. So now that I've gotten into like extraction and distillation as an adult, I truly feel like, wow, I knew what I wanted to do. I wanted to crush up plants and make
Yeah.
things with them. And that's been my whole life. So I wasn't really like thinking like, oh, this is the science of it until later, but like,
Right.
it was like the way I was as a child and how I was raised too. So that's really cool.
Yeah. I think it's what prepared me for the entrepreneurial aspect of the industry, because I think if you come from the traditional academic chemistry background, there's a lot of influences in that environment that are prescriptive, that tell you this is the route, this is these are the instructions. There's a lot of falling into line there. And, where I come from is parents who are like my mom could not buy thyme from the grocery store because it's a ripoff, right? Like,
And
why would you do that? My
yeah,
dad's like, people pay for refrigerated crushed garlic. Absolutely not. Like I come from people who are not just willing to experiment and try things on their own, but are, like aggressively independent in their, willingness to do it themselves if it's not provided for them at the price or in the manner that they're looking for. My dad's a hunter. He's like, I'm not going to contribute to, the bottom line of some ground
sure.
pork that I don't like when I
Yeah.
can make it myself. So that attitude, I think, has been really beneficial. Where I lack, the chemistry and the academic background, I make up for in just like bullheaded, dedication to trying.
Definitely. And that's really all it is, I think, in being a chemist. I mean, it's all about fuck around and find out. I mean, that's it. There are like
Absolutely.
certain rules you need to follow so you don't blow yourself up as you're very well versed in butane safety, right? But yeah, I mean, as far as like experimentation, like you've got it, girl. I'm super impressed. I'm always impressed when I'm around you. I just love it.
Thank you. I think the
Like,
experimentation's the funnest part of the
yeah,
job. And it's the part you can miss out on if you're not, involved in the early stages of the business, or you're not involved in a business where you have a lot of influence over what's happening.
yep, definitely. So let's talk about you building an extraction lab. So what
Sure.
were some of the main challenges that you faced when you were in that early stage?
Well, Sano Gardens is the second lab that I have built out and operated in Colorado. My first one we opened in, I guess technically in 2010. We were operating in 2009, but it was licenses didn't exist, so we'll say 2010. And at that time there wasn't rules, right? So when it comes to like the butane safety, we learned by reading the comments of the Facebook posts about explosions in California. We were
Okay.
learning in real time
Anecdotal data.
from other people. Yep, yep. Not the method I would recommend for anyone else to learn by, but
You did what you
it
could,
was,
literally just getting the information from wherever you could.
yeah, and usually a little later than ideal, usually after I bought something I didn't need, after I did something wrong, usually just a few paces behind where I would have preferred to get that info. But it was very much an entrepreneurial endeavor from every angle, not just the finance and operating the business, but figuring out how to make these products. There wasn't even really consultants at that time in the lab space, So again, I knew the right people, but what I really did for the first 5 years of my career is make incredibly expensive and stupid mistakes. But, as many as possible so I could get it out of the way fast. And then by the time, adult use came to Colorado, I was able to sell that business and start working with extraction tech and start working on the equipment end. And so I got to do the owner operator, and then I got to do the B2B. So by the time I came back to Sano Gardens, I knew exactly all of the things not to do, the list of what to do, much shorter. But having, a very visceral understanding of the list of what not to do is exactly where to start. And, when I got involved in Sano Gardens, it was in that initial consulting role where they had already begun the build out, already begun the design, but because of the nature of licensing, it was like 2 years from when they initially started that application and when Commerce City finally started issuing licenses. And in this industry, 2 years is a million years in terms of, like when they first applied, Shatter was the number one product. And by the time, they're opening the doors in 2018, no one wants Shatter. That's not you know what I mean? And so it was just such a disadvantage for them to come in a little bit late, but already, invested capital. And so that's where I think my skill set, really shines, is that I know what I would do with a blank slate, and all of the funding. But what I'm really good at is making it work with what we've got and figuring out the trajectory of how what we have can become the thing that we want. And that's where, and that's where I came into Sano Gardens. I looked around at this facility and, quickly made some decisions about, focusing on fresh frozen, focusing on live resin, so that as a new brand coming into the space, there was no value, in my opinion, in trying to compete with the established brands on toll processing, on the, the Shatter and, these low margin items where you're competing on price. I came in and I said, if you want to make the margins you need to recover from the things we're never going to use now, the equipment we're going to roll right out of here into the hallway. And kind of took it from that approach of like, we're going to focus on quality first, because I had done a lot of those other products. As a consultant, I'd been in a lot of labs training other people to make these products. And what I knew is that they were very difficult to compete with, especially if you're new. And so I started out with the concept of focusing on high quality, high margin, lower volume, so that we could bootstrap it and actually commit to that level of quality. Because as soon as you start blowing it out in volume, your overhead, kind of tends to take control of your decisions. And I think that is so important for a new business as well as a current one. Once you start getting stuck in that cycle of the toll processing, is very hard to get out, because now you can't pay your payroll unless you run this toll process that you don't actually make money off of. It's a hamster wheel. And so I came in knowing right up front, we're going to do something different. And by different, I don't mean necessarily different products, but by just not doing the other stuff, doing the things that other people weren't doing specifically, and pushing them as far as I could. And that is something that I'm really proud of. We were able to take live resin, as far as I could, to absolutely pure terpenes, to absolutely pure cannabinoids, and figure out, the place in the market for that, which is wild considering the chemists that I met early on in my career. Like, I hired chemists for my first lab, but they didn't know how to make Shatter. And I didn't know why they didn't know. I thought, chemistry, you can't make a thing. I thought that's what I was going to get out of them. By the time I got to where I was at, I finally understood, like, oh, this is what they meant the whole time. What they meant those original chemists that I talked with was, the deconstruction of your extract and the reconstruction of your product, which is not the approach that the cannabis industry has taken generally. There's a lot of pressure to, rely on fire in, fire out as a business model, which is impossible if you're not the grower. And even if you are the grower, you can still fall into all of those other overhead traps that are just difficult to overcome. And so, my perspective in having dealt with almost every type of material, back in the early days, trim was free, right? And, and there were some periods during early adult use where we were like extracting fan leaves because there was just no material anywhere, So I had done enough of everything to know that you can get the goods out of whatever you've got, even if it's not very good, and figure out just how to use the material you have to make a quality standard, and that's
going back to your childhood right now. Like you got what you have, you're going to make it work. You have grit, you have determination, you're able to pivot. Like this is all you are at your core. This is who you are. You are a unique, special person, and you're the full package, and you're bringing it to the table right now. And I'm so impressed by it. I love it.
Thank you. It's
that. Yeah.
It's, it doesn't feel like that abnormal of a perspective, but it is something that, it's hard for labs to pivot towards. I think everyone says they want to make the highest quality product, but if they are waiting for the highest quality cannabis to enable that, that's time wasted at a minimum.
And even if you have the highest quality cannabis and you give it to people who aren't able to innovate and overcome, it means nothing.
Right.
Like you need the team, right? You need the people.
Exactly.
You need the person who's like not going to give up, who's going to pivot when needed, who has the experiential knowledge. That's who you are. That's like your value proposition as a person. This is like what you're bringing to the table.
Absolutely. And I really believe that people will pay more for quality. And anytime people push back on that, it's because they don't have quality.
Yeah.
Like if people aren't paying you more for your product, if people are asking you for discounts, it's because your quality isn't there. And I know that can feel bad when you are trying your hardest, but I believe that, the market will pay for the higher quality product. And
sometimes it's a little bit longer turnover, longer sales cycle, but I totally agree.
You have to take the no up front because they always call back. They will always come around.
That's right. They do. They come around. They really do. And I feel like in the early days, like that was something that was really hard for me because I wanted to bring a high level of quality. I did not want to budge on price because we were so small. We're not a Walmart. Like we couldn't really budge on price. We had a lot of people coming into our basically storage unit at the time, which we were working out of, trying to hustle me, expecting a discount, trying to gaslight, trying to just do anything to get the deal done. And I had to be the no man, which turned me into the bitch, right?
Well, it's because you were the no woman. They would have accepted a no from a man.
Exactly. And it was completely placed upon me to be that person because that's my personality. I'm going to say no to somebody. I don't have a problem with that. And like, it was a slower sales cycle and we struggled a lot in the beginning, but now I'm happy that I held the line.
Yeah. And that's the thing. You have to know your worth.
Yes.
And, know your product's worth. Yes, exactly. And I think that it's tough to do in this industry because there aren't really standardized ways to measure that yet. And the few that we have, the community will rebel against. So, it's like, we'll all be quick to say it isn't just THC potency. However, give me one other number that is consistently available for every product that I could put into a spreadsheet for comparative purposes. I don't have it. Weight, like we went from 3 a light to 45% THC. We didn't get any better information. Like we're working on it. We are changing the way we measure. We just are still not quite getting the, capturing the picture, whatever it is that we need to compare to each other. And I think that is a huge struggle for any business, new or existing, is to just really be able to understand your value before you try to communicate it. because most people communicate it first.
Yes. You have to know what your value proposition is. Who are you talking to? Who are you trying to communicate with? Who is your ideal customer? Who's the customer base here? Those are questions that I definitely learned to ask myself, because when I went into this business, I knew nothing about business. I was just learning as I went along, and accounting, business, whatever. But yeah, I totally agree with you. That's something that I tell people too. I'm like, you need to make a list of, who's your ideal customer? How much do they make? How much do they want to spend? What are you bringing to the table? And there's no wrong answers here. Do you want to be Walmart? Do you want to be Nordstrom's? Do you want to be Bloomingdale's? Do you want to be Mercedes? It doesn't matter. But you got to know who you are and what you're bringing to the table and how much you're worth.
Absolutely. And that impacts every part of your business. I love food examples because they're so easy, to relate to. But I think about cheese, right? If you want Parmesan cheese, there are different categories of Parmesan cheese consumers. And some of them will accept a brick of it, barely wrapped in cellophane with a deli sticker on it, because they're there for the quality of that cheese. Yeah. And they know that if you shred it first, it's going to impact the quality of that cheese. They are not going to get the freshest little shredded strip of Parmesan on their food if it's coming from a, shelf-stable, room temp plastic shaker container. But the people who want a shelf-stable, room temp plastic shaker container because, their 6-year-old has no business using the expensive cheese, it's you've got to know who you're targeting. It doesn't mean that one is right or wrong. Both Parmesan cheeses are important, and for me to get the one I want requires the availability of the other ones so that mine doesn't have to be diluted for those companies to stay in business. And I think that all of the cannabis products, can really be looked at that way. There is a consumer on both ends of the spectrum. You just have to decide which one your product is for and then meet their needs.
Yes. And run your business tight.
Yes.
When you get into that, like you were talking about with toll processing, high volumes, it's a race to the bottom at that point. And I feel like you kind of have to have a lot of backing financially to do that. To get to that.
Or you have to recognize your sell-through volume and live within it,
Right. Yeah. I feel like people scale up so fast, and that was one of the things we didn't do. We didn't scale up too fast. And I have personally seen so many extraction businesses kind of floundering in the big roll-up. They got acquired by, sometimes multi-billion-dollar companies were acquiring, and now I'm like, where are they at? They just went
right.
They flew off.
I mean, we were just at MJ Biz. If you look at the floor map for everyone's booths and the size of booths they had 5 years ago, 4 years ago, 3 years ago, this year, you can literally see who has made the right choices, over the past decade and who hasn't. It is so obvious, who went from sharing a booth with Huber to getting their own, to getting a bigger one, versus the ones who started with a double decker and then a smaller, and now they're sharing a booth with Huber, it is exactly, it's almost.
Or they just have a tiny little stand with their name on it, but they're not actually there. There's no equipment.
Yeah. Or it's finally, we're walking around, come find us. You can literally see how their decisions, have played out in some of those simple ways. But I think, it's a lot of people. You can't make traditional projections in this industry. It changes too quickly. I was talking about that 2-year timeline. 2 years from now, anything could happen.
Absolutely.
It's really difficult to make a truly responsible decision, in this market.
I've never won. I never feel like I'm winning. I'm I have to constantly be on my toes. In my mind, the industry could tank next month and I could be out of customers. I just don't know.
100%.
It's that volatile. It's suddenly this state's online. Suddenly I've got customers here, or suddenly everyone's going bankrupt because we've got VapeGate.
Right. And we all suffer from the same social media bias where we think we're the only ones who are experiencing that. We think that other people are selling more or they are getting a higher price point. And, I think if we all looked in each other's storage rooms, if we all just like posted a picture of all the equipment we ever bought that we don't use.
Oh God, I have my own stack of aging like a fine wine is what I call that.
Yeah. Just... like how many threaded Hawkstrom filters y'all not using out there, right? Like a lot. So, you know, we learn.
And valves that I'm not using right now.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. I feel like we need to do a part 2 because I feel like you and I have so much to talk about. And
I told you earlier, you'll have to cut me off because there's a lot.
I mean, you have to cut me off at this point because you kind of got me going now too. I get it. I love this. I think we do need to do a part 2. Something that I want to talk about before we get off though is your current ventures in mushrooms.
Yes.
Because you're not even like, are you doing cannabis right now or are you just focusing on mushrooms, or tell me about that?
Yeah, somehow I only seem to accumulate more projects. So, you know, Sano Gardens has gotten bigger at the right speed, which is great. Which led me to, you know, opening another lab that's specifically focused on infused joints, because I want to find a product that can compete with cartridges. I feel real bad about the carbon footprint of the cartridges that I have produced and taught other people to produce. There's not a good solution for it. There's no recycling. So the infused joint, you know, project is really fun right now and research heavy. And it also gives me another space where I can do other research. So, you know, bringing mushrooms onto the scene was just an obvious yes for me. I've, you know, been an enthusiast of mushrooms for as long as I have with cannabis. And because I'm in Colorado, I get to talk about it. And I think that's the biggest difference. A lot of people are doing very cool stuff with mushrooms, but Denver's been decriminalized for several years now, and Colorado fully, you know, decriminalized and legalized most of the natural plant medicines last year. So I have the ability to actually speak on it now when we couldn't before, without a little more risk. And so, you know, I'd been pursuing, you know, the extraction of lots of different mushrooms for quite a while. The functional mushrooms are really important to me for health reasons. And of course I have to make them myself because I go into Whole Foods. I see $39 for a powdered who knows what. And I'm like, I can't do that, you know?
No.
Yeah. That's my mom saying like, I'm not paying more than $1.50 a pound for meat. I hear it, you know? So, so I got into that, you know, for personal reasons, primarily. And it just quickly snowballed. So, you know, in the psychedelic space, there's, you know, a lot of anecdotal, you know, research. There's a lot of clinical research that's not applicable to real life. Talk about, you know, testing using isolates versus whole plant stuff. And, you know, so it's just the same holes in the market that we had with cannabis 10 years ago. And so, you know, showing up with my long list of things to not do again and things that do work, I went right into research first. So rather than investing in mushroom extraction equipment first, I invested in HPLC first.
Perfect.
So that I could try things and find out which one was actually going to work the best. And so, I bought this HPLC just for mushrooms last summer, not this most recent summer, but 2022, and started pursuing, you know, some method development to figure out what I could see and what I could impact, and then, you know, extracting to accommodate that. And now that I've got a good set of data, this summer I teamed up with Dustin and, you know, Mike and Patrick from the early days of ERS, Lab Society's distillation course. We all got together and started putting together the mushroom extraction course so that we could start sharing some of this knowledge. Because I think the funnest thing about, you know, mushrooms becoming more popular is that anybody can grow mushrooms in, you know, in a much more legitimate way than anybody can grow weed, because you really can just buy a bag and put it on the counter. But, you know, for the same reasons that I would encourage people to extract cannabis, you know, there's a lot of value in extracting your mushrooms, especially if you're just, you know, think about extracting the top layer of your mycelial cake and the bottom of the mushrooms that you're cutting off when you harvest. That's all alkaloid content and healthy sugars and valuable compounds that you probably don't want to eat. It's full of your substrate, right? That's not going to be good in your stomach, but I can't justify throwing away perfectly good drugs. So, you know, teaching people how to take advantage of that is huge, because I want people to grow them themselves. And that does require the ability to, you know, finish out the process, extract it, store it, infuse it into products. I feel very strongly that, it's important for people to understand that extracting something and concentrating it is not solely intended to increase your dose. In fact, it's the most effective way to decrease your dose. Because if you're dealing with a raw material, a whole mushroom, just like a whole nug, what are you going to do? Count trichomes on your nug to figure out how many puffs you can take per joint? Absolutely not. The same type of problem exists with mushrooms. How are you going to know, even if I test one mushroom from a bag, that is not indicative of the potency of the other mushrooms in the bag? And so creating a homogeneous product that you can store and that you can, dose yourself from is so important, especially if you want to apply it, to medical uses. But also just if you want to experiment with this, the odds of getting the dose comfortably correct when you just eat a whole mushroom is going to depend entirely on the mushroom, where it came from, who grew it, the genetics, the substrate. There's too many variables. So I think that the extraction is a huge value for people. And I really believe it's something that if everyone learns how to do it themselves up front, we can control the industry and keep it from getting a little bit too big too quickly. If you don't need to buy your functional mushrooms from Whole Foods won't be able to overcharge for them. And if you don't need to buy your psilocybin products from a pharmaceutical company, they will not be able to fund the manufacturing. So it is our
100%
best rebellion.
I'm all about that. I believe in the plant medicine. I believe that everybody should be able to access it. And it's an act of rebellion, really, this form of entrepreneurship that you're doing right now, because you're not going to have it. And I'm not going to have it either. The thought of big pharma getting its hands on psilocin and psilocybin absolutely disgusts me. And I 100% support what you're doing right now as far as educating consumers how to grow and extract this compound, because it is a medicine and people need it.
Absolutely. And, I want the pharmaceutical research to exist and to occur. I learn a lot from their papers, but I just know that is not going to provide the access needed for the people who need it most. I always bring up veterans because it's just so frustrating. I've got two brothers in the military, and it's like, they can get, all of their teeth, all their dental work done, but they can't get real mental health medicine if they wanted it.
I get that. I'm a veteran myself, so I totally understand that.
Bias is so obvious in that instance. And because they don't have the alternative to just go shop another doctor, I just think about all these veterans who have to sneak around to get their cannabis and, that have to worry about getting drug tested when they go in, and mushrooms are such a fantastic option for those people. It's such an important medicine that I think if people aren't getting it directly from themselves or a trusted source, we could see issues, and the best way to fix that is to just share that information as wide and far as we possibly can and enable more people to start their own small business. I look at Amazon's best competition is Etsy, right? Like that's the best option you've got, is like a market that's so small it can't be targeted because it's big but tiny little pieces. And I love that. And I think that is how we can, keep mushrooms safe from the taxation and regulation that we allowed into the cannabis market.
Yeah, definitely. And I feel so strongly about that with mushrooms and other plant medicine as well. Do you feel like you have like a strong connection to that medicine, and this is like a form of activism for you?
I mean, I need it.
Yeah.
I think about like the time and energy that I have wasted in my life by not just accepting that you can treat a problem with medicine. I come from that do-it-yourself, kind of mentality. And unfortunately, that does overflow into how do you deal with your emotions? How do you deal with discomfort? How do you, that bled into all other parts of my life. And while I would say that it's fun to experiment and see what happens when you're maybe trying to, extract elderberry.
Mhm.
I would not say that you should lean only on creative, never before tried methods to solve your depression, to deal with like anger management. And, especially as a mother, like I always loved mushrooms, but in my youth, it was like we all just ate 3.5 grams. The idea of a microdose was
Yeah.
not a thing. That was a waste. You only get one Friday a week. We had to make it count. And so, I didn't use it correctly, in the early days of use, but especially over the past decade, I don't know where I would be if I didn't have, the personal regulation that I get out of using mushrooms, out of using things like DMT. And, psychedelics just allow so much personal control over, your own healing process, which
Yeah.
I feel is, if it's this important to me, I am not unique enough to be the only one. I'm not the only person who's getting this kind of benefit from it. I know that I was an angrier person,
Yeah.
before I was using mushrooms the way that I've been using them over the past decade. And I think that there's so much benefit that, people are missing out on. And so, it's not even as altruistic as maybe I'm making it sound. It's like, I just think everyone needs mushrooms, like just a little bit at some point in their lives.
I understand. I get it. I mean, you have your business model with the classes, but this is a form of rebellion and activism for you because you believe in the sacred medicine. I believe in it too. It's profoundly affected my life. And like I said, I hate the thought of it getting into the hands of big pharma. I think that everyone should be empowered to grow these mushrooms. Nobody needs to be scared to grow their own mushrooms. They need the knowledge.
Right.
And if that's your value proposition, then that's, you should be compensated for that. But it is altruistic.
Absolutely. And really the classes are, I would say it's almost an entrepreneurial class because, my hope is to find other people who feel the way I do about it that are in a position to be the trusted source for other people who haven't had their first microdose yet.
You're basically an evangelist right now for mushrooms.
Imagine that. I rejected the Mormon church and here I am door knocking.
This is it right now.
Yeah, I feel it though. I just think it's so important. And I think even if someone never takes this medicine, I want them to have the knowledge and understanding of what this medicine does so that they can be, more compassionate to the people in their life who do need it.
Yeah. Well, I would love to keep talking,
of course,
but we have to end this podcast.
I understand.
I think we should regroup in like
definitely
a couple and do another one because
of course, no, I'm down for sure.
I love this dialogue, and I want to talk more about your life, your life as a mom, your life as a woman in cannabis, your activism. I want to hear more about it. I want updates. So I would love to have you.
Absolutely. No, we'll talk again. Let me know.
I would love to. This has been great catching up with you.
Thank you so much for having me. It's, it's always good to connect. Like I said, it could be isolating in this industry, but none of us are the only one experiencing anything. So
right. Well, we're all like nose to the grindstone all the time, and
yeah.
we don't really
sometimes you don't see the sunlight, you're just in that building all day. So it's always good to have an excuse to get out.
So for anyone who maybe doesn't know who you are, where can we find you on social media?
So Instagram's the one that I use the most, and that's just my name, Murphy Murri, on Instagram in the link in my bio. What's that?
Murri, correct?
Yes. Yeah. Yep. Okay. Tricky spelling. But yeah, you can find, what I'm currently up to there. The link in my bio will take you to a bunch of different places. If you're interested in the mushroom classes, that one's easy. It's the mushroomclass.com. The company's called Myco Research Solutions, little wordplay off of, Mike and Pat's original company, Elevated Research Solutions. But so we're doing the mushroom classes pretty regularly. And then, I'm still doing cannabis extraction classes with equipment manufacturers. So, you can just kind of follow me online and see what's happening. If you're in Colorado, feel free to buy my products and support the brand there. Otherwise, wherever you're at, just go ahead and make something for yourself today. Is that's a great way to support me, is to stay curious and experiment, because I learn from the people I teach in equal quantities. So there's a lot of value.
Just get out there and do it.
Yeah.
I think. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Great. Well, everyone, you can find Beaker and Wrench on Instagram. Our handle is @Beaker and Wrench. And we also have a YouTube page for more episodes from our minicast. Murphy, thank you so much again for coming on and talking to me about all this stuff. And that's a wrap.
All right. Perfect. Thanks for having me.